Please welcome Meg Rosoff. So we heard you receive the call there from ALMA.
Embarrassing.
Is it?
Yeah, I hate the sound of my own voice, so I just sound like an idiot.
Everybody hates the sound of their own voice. But was it expected at all, this call?
God, no. I mean, you can't fake that kind of reaction. I never in 1,000 years expected to win that prize, because there's so many people on the list who I think of as the great international names in children's literature. And I certainly don't think of myself that way. So.
We do.
I know. Well, I'm going to start. I'm going to start now.
So who was the first one you called?
Well, my husband heard me, and he came upstairs. And then my daughter came running in, and she had her telephone her computer with her. And I said, it's the Astrid Lindgren Award. I think there's some money for the prize. And then my daughter was going, you know, click, 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 Astrid Lindgren, and then she went, Mom! So, yeah. And
5 million Swedish crowns.
5 million, yeah.
Mm. So, Astrid Lindgren, what has she meant to you?
Well, she was very important to me as a child in America. Of course, I was a huge reader, and I also was not a very proper girl. I wasn't a good girl. I was sort of wanted to be a boy. I liked running around climbing trees. I didn't like wearing dresses. I still don't.
Tomboyish.
Tomboyish. And so the books of hers that were published in America in the 1960s, really, was Pippi Longstocking. And so for me, to have this heroine in big, chunky boots, you know, with a horse in one hand, I mean, it was like, you don't have to be a girl. You can be whatever you like.
Yeah. Well, the award committee writes, like Astrid Lindgren, Rosoff empathizes completely with young people and is utterly loyal to them. So what is it with young people that make them so perfect as protagonists?
I think everybody has almost a misconception about how writers write. I'm not writing for young people, and I'm not even writing about young people. I'm writing about myself. And for me, that period of adolescence where you're searching to figure out who you are, and asking questions like, what will I do with my life? And will anybody ever love me? You know, those are the questions that don't finish when you're 19. They go on and on and on in your life. And sometimes they go away for 10 years or 20 years, and then they come back again. And so I'm still writing about those questions. I mean, I didn't know who I was until I was 46, really, and started writing.
Yeah, you said that you left adolescence when you were in your 40s.
Well, I'm not even sure I ever left. I think I'm still kind of, you know, swimming around in there. And of course, I just don't think anyone ever really leaves that process of self-discovery behind. And so that's what I'm writing about. I'm writing about how to be a person. And that's the kind of quest that begins when you're a child, but it doesn't finish. It doesn't finish when you're 18 or 19. And I think when I was young, I had an idea that, you know, suddenly when you were 20 or 21, you become an adult, and that's it, it's over. Then you know who you are, and you know what you're meant to do with your life. And, you know, all the adults in the world will tell you that it's not like that. It's a constant process. Yeah.
But what is the difference? I mean, is there a difference between having all these questions and maybe thinking that you've answered them? What's the difference between being an adolescent and an adult?
Well, I'm wiser than I used to be. I mean, I think there's no question about it. But I've spent, 50 years thinking about what is the point of living? How to be a parent, how to be a person, how to be a writer. I didn't find that whole coming of age thing simple at all. I'm not sure if anybody really finds it simple, but I found it particularly difficult. And so...
Why so?
I was I was a clever child, but I couldn't understand. I think it was because my parents and society and everybody was telling me, here are the edges of the world. You live between these two edges. And I didn't really understand who made those edges. Why does the world stop here and here and not here and here? So I always imagined the world as being like those old maps, that they had in the, 15th, 14th century, where there was Europe and Asia and Africa, and then boats, and then sea monsters, and then just the edges and boats going over the edges. And so where I'm interested in is the edges. And nobody talks all that much about the edges, where life starts to get a bit strange, where the rules don't really apply. And I think one of the reasons I'm so interested in teenagers is that that's an age where most people haven't quite accepted that the rules that society tells them about where the edges of the world are exist. So you're still asking those questions. How far does the world spread? What's normal? Am I sane? Am I crazy? What's love? What does it mean to be in love? What does it mean to be me? What will I be? And those questions are so big. And, we talk about children or young adults like it's kind of a, there, dear. You'll figure it out and then you'll be a grown-up. But I think any grown-up who really is thinking about the world is grappling with those questions really until the day you die.
It's like Dr. House says, everybody lies, especially grown-ups.
Exactly, exactly.
But you wrote your debut novel, The Way I Live Now, and it was published when you were 47.
Yeah.
So what happened that made you start writing at that point of your life?
Well, I was convinced that I could never be a writer because I never knew any writers, and so writers were magical creatures to me. I could never be a proper writer, but I was very unhappy working in career after career after career. I got fired a lot, and then my youngest sister got cancer, and then my middle sister also got cancer, and then my youngest sister died, and there was very much a sense, everybody knows, we all know we're going to die, but there's always a moment, I think, in every life where you suddenly realise it's going to happen to me. I thought, I don't want to die without ever feeling that I'd done what I really wanted to do. And so I thought, all right, I can't be a writer. I'm not the right person, but I'm going to try. And so I thought I would write about ponies or horses, because that's what I obsessively read when I was a child. But then I wrote a pony book, a horse book, and I sent it to an agent, and she said, I just don't think I can publish a horse book with quite so much sex in it. And it wasn't that it had so much sex in it, but I went from ponies to this difficult relationship, and then
it wasn't about ponies at all.
It wasn't about ponies at all, and in fact, hundreds of pages went by, and I forgot to mention the ponies, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to try something different, and I mean, for me, it was kind of a miracle in a way that anybody liked How I Live Now, because nobody understood the ads I wrote, and I had never been a success in any way.
Were you bad in advertising?
Bad. I like now to think that I was too good, but but yes, I was bad. I mean, I was really bad. I wasn't interested in selling things. Which is kind of really a problem if you're in advertising.
It is.
I just never really understood what it was all about. But I kept thinking if I try harder and harder and harder, eventually I might be able to be good at advertising. I think that probably wasn't true. And they used to have focus groups all the time where they would get in 20 housewives, you know, to say, look at these ads about noodles. You know, and I would written these ads about noodles, and they would always look at my ads and they'd go, we don't know what she's talking about. So I didn't have the common touch or something. I don't know what it was. But I wrote How I Live Now very quickly, and it felt like coming home.
Well, actually, I think How I Live Now is sort of a Cormac McCarthy's The Road for kids. And I really love that about you, because you never shy away from catastrophe. And I'm not talking about your average teenage catastrophe, pimples and heartaches, but you're writing about plane crashes, world wars, deadly diseases. But how come there are so many catastrophes in your books?
Well, I think life is full of catastrophes. You know, I think nobody gets through life without a catastrophe or two. And I suppose if you do, then it's some kind of strange miracle. But also, I think I have the typical writer's temperament, which is I'm a bit of a depressive, but a cheerful depressive. But you know, when terrible things happen to people, the first response is often, why me? Whereas I tend to think, you know, God, nothing terrible has happened to me all week. You know, it's about time something awful happened. So I kind of think the opposite, why not me?
So are you a bit like the just in case who feels actually harassed by destiny?
I don't feel harassed by destiny, but for instance, when I heard that I'd won the ALMA prize, my first feeling was almost terror, because I thought, oh my God, something so fabulous has happened to me. Now something terrible is going to happen just to make up for it. So it's a kind of superstition or a kind of, I don't know, a kind of darkness in a way. I'm never surprised when things go horribly wrong.
No.
But I don't sit around worrying. In fact, I'm not a worrier at all. I'm quite fearless. But sometimes when you're fearless, things do go wrong more than if you're cautious.
Yeah. Well, another thing that you actually have in common with Astrid Lindgren is that you never write cautionary tales. There are no lessons to be learned here, and that's so liberating, especially in literature for young adults. So is that important to you, to stay away from lecturing?
Well, yes. I mean, what am I going to tell them? You know, I can tell them what I've figured out. But, you know, the Astrid Lindgren's books are so full of loss and death and darkness and evil and, you know, but only because the world is full of those things. And even if, you know, we're not experiencing it right here, right now in this studio, you know, all you have to do is turn on the news and you see how lucky we all are for, you know, having lives that are going reasonably well.
Yeah, I introduced you as a writer who knows that young people don't want easy answers, but difficult questions.
That's puts it absolutely perfectly. Because, and of course, it's not all teenagers. I'm not writing for everybody. You know, you have to choose the books that you want to read. And you know, it's funny that you mentioned Cormac McCarthy, because I've always loved Cormac McCarthy. And in fact, people sometimes say, why do you write without quote marks sometimes? And I said, well, other writers have done that before me. In fact, Cormac McCarthy is one who does. But no, I don't. I think there are teenagers and then there are adults and there are children, you know, young children who are asking difficult questions and worried about the answers.
Yeah. Well, another recurring themes in your books is actually dogs.
Yes.
There are the comforting dogs, the significant dogs, and the, well, fantasy dogs.
Yes.
So what is it with you and dogs?
Yes, what is it with me and dogs? I think I'm part dog, maybe. When I was a child, I desperately wanted a dog, and my parents said no, our life is too chaotic, you know, 4 children, small house. And I had a plan that I would act very crazy. And then my parents would be worried because I would be acting very crazy. And so they would take me to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist would say, what is wrong with you, little girl? And I would say, I need a dog. And the psychiatrist would go back to my parents and say, she needs a dog. Sadly, it didn't work. But eventually we did get a dog. And you know, I was that kind of teenager. I wasn't popular particularly. I wasn't particularly pretty. And my dog was my sort of closest confidant. And I just always loved animals, dogs and horses. And then I finally got 2 dogs. Let's see, after I had cancer, so after How I Live Now was published, and in fact,
you got cancer as well.
I got cancer as well.
All the 3 sisters.
3 of 4, yeah. But I was happy because I found out I had cancer the week that How I Live Now came out, and I was so elated that I finally had written a book, that the idea that I might die was sort of okay because I was no longer worried that I would have this pathetic funeral where everybody said all she ever did was work in advertising.
Did you cheat destiny?
I don't know. You don't really know when you've cheated destiny, do you? I mean, unless a piano falls right next to you, then maybe you feel you have cheated destiny. But yes, I think in a way there was a lot of death in my family. And just in case was very much that feeling that fate is out to get you, was very much not so much the way I felt, but the way my family felt, with three of us, all with cancer at the same time. And we became quite superstitious in a way, very academic, very intellectually rigorous family, and suddenly we were all picking up pennies on the ground thinking it was lucky. And so I started to think about what it meant to try to have something that would control your life against this kind of cancer sweeping through everything.
So that's when you wrote Just in Case?
That's when I wrote Just in Case, about this boy who's terrified of fate and tries to cheat fate. And I had a lot of trouble with that book. And in fact, when the doctor said, your cancer, your tumor is malignant, I swear the very first thing that went through my head was, whew, thank goodness I don't have to finish the second book, because it wasn't going well. And I thought, well, every cloud has a silver lining.
That's really macabre.
It is, but I mean, black humour, you know, I think that's my favourite kind of humour. But anyway, the book was going very badly. And then one day I was sitting at my desk and it was as if it was a literal thing. An invisible greyhound wandered into the book. And I kind of said, well, what are you doing here? You know, and he practically said, well, I'm here to save your book. And he did. And so that was the year I got 2 dogs. And then my next book was about a white horse. And I told everybody, don't let me get a white horse. So,
well, that imaginary dog, actually, in Just in Case, that's my favorite of all the dogs in your books. But do you think that being part dog, part cheerful, depressive, is that sort of the thing, the ultimate combination to become an award-winning writer?
Oh, God. I don't think there's a formula, sadly. I would have followed it if I'd known. But I think in order to be good as a writer, you know, my job is to think. When I worked in advertising and publishing and all these different careers, I didn't have time to think. You know, I was running to work in the morning and then I was running home because I had a small child at home, and then I had to make dinner, and, you know, the house was falling to pieces and I had to do the laundry, and everything was... I remember feeling everywhere I go, I run because I'm always late. Whereas when you're a writer, the great luxury of it is you're allowed to sit on a chair and look out the window and just think about anything, all the big questions. And I love that more than anything. And maybe that shows in the books.
It does. It does. Well, your most recent novel, Jonathan Unleashed, I recognize you here, and there are the dogs. There's plenty of dogs in it as well. But your protagonist is no longer an adolescent, a young person, but a grown man. So what changed? Did anything change?
No, nothing changed at all. And he's not a grown man. He's completely pathetic. He's 23 or 24, and he's just as lost as any of my teenage protagonists. In fact, much more so. I mean, Mila in Picture Me Gone is a weirdly mature 12-year-old. Whereas Jonathan is a weirdly immature 23-year-old. And, you know, I'm so interested in this idea that, you know, I think people have a tendency to think of 20 like the border between, you know, Germany and Poland. And it's not a border. You know, I was so lost, I think, all through my 20s, most of my 30s, and actually well into my 40s. And so the idea that you become an adult at 20, to me, is ridiculous. So I was just writing the same book I'm always writing. It's about, you know, a young man who doesn't understand what it means to be a person. You know, and he wants a book. He asks in the novel, he says, why isn't there a book called How to Be a Person? And of course, it's the same question that my younger protagonists are asking, unless they're strangely wise. And I do have very wise children in my books.
You do. And maybe that's the question that you answer in your books as well. How to be a person.
I'm trying. I'm still trying to answer that question. You know, how to be a person. What does... You know, and every new thing that happens to you makes you ask the question again. You know, you win the ALMA award and there's a big sum of money and people look at you differently. So how do I be that person?
So how are you that person?
Well, I don't know yet. I'm still slightly stunned, I think. But how to be that person? Ask me again in 6 months or 6 years, I think.
I will.
Okay.
I saw on your website it states that you have 1 husband, 1 daughter, and 237 unfinished projects, and we're looking forward to all of them.
Oh, gosh.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.